We're going to be talking about developing your patterns. I've already photographed one of my patterns, and now I'm going to talk about how to set up a new document in Illustrator and then work with those materials that I've photographed. So I'm going to go right here to Create New, or if this isn't open, you can go File, New. And then over here under preset details, I'm going to name it something that I'll remember. And then our width is going to be 5 inches, and make sure that you type in 5 IN for inches and then 12 IN for 12 inches. You don't need to change anything else. And then we're going to say create. And this is the artboard that we're going to work on. It's different than Photoshop in the sense of like you can have multiple artboards. Right now we're just going to be working with one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go down to Open, or you could do Command O for Open. I'm going to scroll down to where I've already imported some JPEGs. You can see I've got some color ones, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but right now I'm going to select the black and white one that has a good high amount of contrast. You'll notice it'll open really, really large. That's totally fine. I'm going to click on it, and you'll notice I have the blue bounding box with my handles that show up. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to shrink it down. I'm just going to resize it and pull it back onto my artboard. All of your key commands for zooming in and out that we used in Photoshop are applicable here. So I can do Command 0, or I can go up to View, and I can say Fit Artboard in Window, and that'll just fit it right there so I can see it. So I've got my artboard, and then I also have my JPEG, and my JPEG is what's referred to as a raster element, so it's made up of lots of little pixels, and we want to convert those pixels into a vector element, which is what we use in Illustrator. So it's just plain black and white. I'm not really going to be doing too much with this in terms of kind of value. I'd kind of like to directly translate it into a graphic element. So I'm going to select it, and I know that's selected because there's a blue bounding box around my edges. I'm going to go up to Image Trace. And it'll give you a warning. Typically, the files from your phones are not going to be that bad, so I'll go ahead and say OK. It'll think for a minute, and then you'll see it pretty quickly translates it into a vector element. The thing that you have to remember to do, though, is you'll notice that says View Tracing Result. Right next to that is a button that says Expand. So I'm going to click on Expand, and now you'll notice that kind of all the little elements are kind of highlighted in blue. That means it's all been converted to vector elements that are infinitely scalable. Right now, though, I want to get rid of my background because I don't necessarily want to have a white background behind everything that I'm doing. To give you an example, I'm going to draw with my rectangle tool. I'll change the color of it so that we can see what's going on. Okay. Oh, that's a bright color. Let's bring it down just a little bit. There we go. We'll soften it. All right, so the way that things work in Illustrator is objects sit on top of other objects, and you have to rearrange them. So my rectangle layer is sitting on top of my pattern layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Object, and of course one of the first things is how to arrange it. And right now I'm going to say Send to Back because I don't really want it sitting on top of my pattern. As you can see, I've got a white background, and because of that white background, I can't see the color behind it, which is not the best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into my file, and the way that Illustrator works is that you can click into multiple kind of stages of your vector element that you're working with, which I know sounds really scary, but it's okay. So we're just going to click twice, and you'll notice that the inside isn't necessarily highlighted, but kind of the outside of my shape, and then also the blue edges. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Select and say Same Fill Color. And what that's going to do is it's going to select every single thing in this object that is white. So everything that I selected, it's going to select that. And then all I'm going to do is hit Delete, and now I've gotten rid of my background. Now you might say, why is my background kind of transparent looking? Here it's saying I'm in a group, what's happening? Just double click anywhere back onto anywhere kind of in this gray area or even on the white area, and that'll get you back to your main artboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate and change the color of my pattern. So once again, I'm going to fit it onto my artboard. Now your pattern now is infinitely scalable. It is a vector element, so I can hold down Shift and I can scale it. If I hold down Option, I can repeat it. And oh, look, I've got a pattern already. Now, the thing is that that can get, there are two ways to do this assignment. One is to do it by hand, like I just did, which is like clicking and dragging. And then the other way is to use the pattern tool in Illustrator. Either one of those is completely fine for the assignment. Right now I've got a little bit of a low contrast because my fill color, which is the color inside of these strokes right here, is black. And my background isn't super light, so the value contrast is a little bit low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make a new swatch. And when you click on new swatch, which is right here, which is just that little plus button, color mode should be changed to CMYK. This is going to give you the greatest kind of flexibility for your swatches. Right now I'm going to make a white swatch, and the contrast is increased exponentially. So now I can do some kind of cool things. You can also use the shift button. If you hold down shift, I can select multiple, and then if I hold down option like I did again, now I can kind of fill the space pretty easily. And all of these you can go through and you can change what that fill color is. So let's say that I didn't really like that white. Let's say that I wanted, let's go back to our CMYK because that'll allow us to have some. Let's say that I wanted to kind of play with the contrast. I want to make kind of a green swatch. I'll have a green one right there. And you can go through and kind of make as many swatches as you want. So there's lots of different options for how to kind of play with mixing your colors, which I'll talk about a little bit more in class. But this way I can go through and I can kind of change each one that I'm working with. So I've got a background color that I created with my rectangle tool. The other thing that I can also do is go in and create my own pattern. So I'm going to select the object that I want to repeat, and I'm going to go up to Object, and sort of towards the bottom, about 2/3 of the way down, you've got an option for Pattern. I'm going to click on Make, and I'm actually going to change the color of this so that we can see it. There we go. So it'll preview and demo what that pattern will look like. We can go through our tile types, and we can say brick row by row, hex by column, which kind of mixes them up a little bit. You can also adjust how many copies are made. And you'll notice kind of like each one of these is kind of dramatically changing how that pattern is working so that you're not doing all this complex work by hand. So when I'm happy with that, all I have to do up here is say done for right now. And it'll add it to my swatches, and I'll show you what that will look like. So if I go up to my swatches, right here it is labeled New Pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the rectangle tool again. This time though, I'm going to click on my new pattern that I made, and voila. I can now have that pattern show up. What's really cool is I can go back into that pattern if I double click it. And I click on this, and let's say, oh, I really did, that's like I don't really like that color that it's in. I can double click my swatch. And let's say that it's just, I want to just make it like a much lighter value. So I'm changing my sliders. I'm saying, okay, you'll notice that it'll dynamically adjust. And if I say done, it'll save over that original pattern, or I can say save a copy, and I'll say okay. And it says it's been added to my swatches. And now I've got this pattern kind of preloaded in. So I've got my pattern. I can play with how I'm applying it. Right now I'm just going to kind of have it kind of filling the space, and I think that that looks pretty good. And then there are lots of other ways that we can kind of play with it, but this will kind of get you started in terms of either doing it by hand. And if you ever lose kind of like, where did my original like little piece go, you can always go back in here, select it, copy it, and then you can paste it right there. So if you want to do it by hand, you can do it that way. Or if you want to use the pattern tool and play with it, you can do it that way as well. So there's multiple ways to kind of build and kind of organize how you're going to be doing your pattern. Your pattern can be filled into any of the shape tools. So here I'm going to go to the ellipse tool. If I hold down shift, I can do a perfect circle, and I can go here, and you'll notice that it's going to fill it in that way too. You can also load it into a brush if you wanted to. That gets a little bit tricky, but we'll talk about that. And you can also load it into a couple other things as well. As if you're comfortable making shapes, you can do that as well. So this will get you started kind of making your shapes, kind of filling them in, playing with putting different types of colors behind them. How does that work? How does that look? What does it look like on a white background versus a colored background? And then the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be showing you how to change your colors. If you're importing a pattern that has a lot of color to it, it's not just black and white, what that will look like.